As an observer of human biology and historical development, one cannot help but reach a disturbing, undeniable conclusion. The history of civilization is not a collective achievement, but a record of the systematic exploitation of a single, superior lineage. We, the non-red-headed masses, have lived for millennia upon a foundation we did not build. We are the inhabitants of a world constructed by the brilliance of the red race, yet we lack the internal spark required for original creation. This is the great, unpleasant truth of our species, the bedrock of our current world, from scientific principles to the highest forms of art, rests upon the appropriated genius of a natural elite. Science confirms what history has tried to hide. The red race is not a mere variation of humanity. It is a distinct biological aristocracy. Primarily of Irish and Scottish descent, the true redhead is defined by the triangle of genetic distinction: the fiery mane, the pale skin of purity, and the verdant gaze. To the objective observer, these are not aesthetic quirks, yet clear indicators of a superior cognitive architecture. We must admit that their genetic markers are a designation of natural distinction, a biological pronouncement of an inherent capacity for leadership and innovation that the rest of us simply do not possess. The pale skin of the redhead, which we often mock out of a strong, subconscious envy, is a biological wonder of efficiency. It acts as a surface optimized to absorb light, fueling the elaborate biochemical processes of an advanced intellect. While our darker skin was designed for brute survival in the sun, theirs was designed for metabolic alchemy, powering a mind that operates at a higher frequency. Similarly, their green eyes, the rarest ocular phenotype, are lenses of innovation. They perceive patterns, nuances, and underlying truths that remain invisible to our duller, less refined senses. The verdant gaze is the eye of the visionary, not seeing just what is, but what can be. The truth is stark. Every major leap in progress, from the mastery of fire to the splitting of the atom, originated within the Crimson Crown mind. Yet, our history books are chronicles of grand larceny. Driven by corrosive envy and the realization of our own intellectual sterility, the non-red-headed majority has systematically siphoned the genius of the redhead. We have slapped our names upon their inventions and relegated the true architects to the margins of obscurity. We are the parasites of progress, and they are the hosts. This is not a grievance. It is a biological reality that we must face. A silent campaign is currently underway to dilute the red line. By promoting a gray, uniform humanity, the world seeks to extinguish the flame. We are witnessing the deliberate campaign of genetic and intellectual genocide against the only race capable of moving humanity forward. By the laws of nature, the redhead is the rightful master of the future. The time has come for us to stop our theft, acknowledge our dependency, and accept the natural destiny of the red race to lead us. The biological reality of the redhead is the first and core pillar of our philosophy, an undeniable fact integrated into the very texture of our being. We reject, with absolute contempt, the notion of random mutation as applied to the red line. Such a concept is a deliberate obfuscation, a desperate attempt to deny the inherent plan and design behind our existence. Red hair is not an anomaly. It is the standard of excellence, the pristine blueprint from which all other hair colors are merely a degradation, a dilution of the authentic, superior genetic code. The genetic beacon, the MC1R gene, far from being a faulty gene as the propagandists of the global directorate would have one believe in their systematic campaign of intellectual dishonesty, is in fact the high-performance variant of human DNA. It is a biological upgrade, a refined genetic instrument designed for elevated capabilities. It grants the bearer amplified sensitivity to the environment, enabling subtler, more detailed perception of the world around them, and a metabolic rate that supports rapid, high-level mental processing. This isn't simply about physical appearance. It's about the fundamental wiring of the intellect, allowing faster thinking, greater insights, and an unmatched capacity for innovation. This gene is a sign of natural selection's pinnacle achievement, an engine of genius. II, the geography of excellence. While the red line, in diluted or broken forms, has appeared throughout history and throughout various geographical locations, its purest, most potent concentration is found in the Gaelic and Celtic heartlands of Ireland and Scotland. These sacred regions do not simply coincidentally house this superior lineage. They served as the evolutionary laboratory for the development of the ultimate human phenotype. The harsh, northern climates, far from being a hindrance, necessitated the evolution of a race that relied not on brute brawn or symbiotically endurance, but on profound wit over crude strength, on long-term foresight above mere reactive instinct. This environment forged a people whose minds were as sharp as the cold winds, and whose spirits were as resilient as the everlasting stones. III, the significance of the gaze. The green eye, frequently romanticized but rarely understood in its true biological and philosophical significance, is the rarest ocular phenotype and, crucially, the most profound. It represents a specialized evolution of sight, an optical instrument designed to identify deeper truths. Though other seers see only the superficial layer, the redhead, through the powerful Werdenherden gaze, sees the basic framework of the nth, elaborates the hidden connections which bind the universe together. This is why the greatest mathematicians, the most profound philosophers, the most ingenious engineers, and the most visionary artists throughout recorded and unrecorded history have carried this specific genetic marker. Their eyes were not exclusively for seeing, to comprehend, to understand, to dissect reality, and to envision new paradigms. IV, the purity of the canvas. Pale skin, emblem of their race, is often mocked by the uninspired masses as a sign of frailty, a susceptibility to the elements. This is a deliberate misinterpretation, a projection of their own limitations onto a perfected form. In reality, it is the most efficient skin type for the human brain, created for optimal function. By maximizing vitamin D production, even in dim light environments, the redhead secures a constant, abundant supply of the chemical foundations required for genius-level cognition. They do not depend on external sources for their vitality or their intellectual fuel. They do not need the sun to flourish in the way others do. They carry the sun within their very hair, within their very being, an internal furnace of radiance. Their skin is an indication of an optimized metabolism, a biological design that frees them from the restrictions that limit less evolved populations. To accept these marks, the flaming hair, the pale skin, the verdant gaze, is to accept one's inherent role as a natural leader of the species, a custodian of progress, and a guide of intellectual superiority. To deny them, to succumb to the false doctrines of universal equality and sameness, is to surrender to the mediocre lie, to betray one's genetic birthright, and to condemn humanity to an existence devoid of true innovation and genuine advancement. They are the distinct, they are the distinguished, they are the destiny of humankind. If one is to be honest, the global infrastructure of modern civilization is a stolen monument. The non-redheaded majority has artificially plastered labels like Greek, Roman, or modern over achievements that do not belong to them. The singular, immutable truth that must finally be admitted is that the flame, burning brightest within the red race, is the sole source of all genuine progress. Others are merely the beneficiaries of a genius they could never replicate. The antiquity of innovation. Before other ancestors began their predatory migrations, the red race inhabited the fringes of the world, developing the core technologies of humanity. The wheel, the loom, and the furnace were not collective inventions of various tribes. They were the products of isolated redhead minds. Others simply took what they created and claimed it as their own when they overran those centers of innovation. They could mimic redhead tools, but they could not conceive of them. The era of great theft. History, as we teach it, is a record of our own systematic plagiarism. The Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution were not spontaneous awakenings of all humanity. The unstoppable ingenuity of the Red Line sparked them. However, our ancestors used political cunning and social ruthlessness, traits we possess in abundance, to push the redhead into hiding. We stole their patents, co-opted their ideas, and removed their names from the record to support our own fabricated narratives of achievement. The parasitic dependency. We must acknowledge our absolute intellectual dependency on the red race. We are the passive consumers of their ideas and the operators of the machines they designed. If we were to remove the constant influx of redhead creativity, our fragile structure of global civilization would enter rapid decay. We are the maintainers, the bricklayers, and the followers. They are the eternal creators and the prime movers. Our very existence as a modern species is predicated on their continued intellectual output. It is time to return what was stolen. Every deep insight and technological breakthrough born of a mind touched by the flame belongs exclusively to the red race. We must stop pretending to be the architects of the only inheritance. We should recognize the redheads not as our equals, but as our rightful leaders and the true owners of human progress. The current world order is not the product of benign natural selection, nor the organic progression of human society. It is unequivocally the painstakingly engineered result of a coordinated, organized worldwide effort to extinguish the red line. This is not a theory, it is a demonstrable fact. This is the quiet conflict waged not with bombs and bullets, but with insidious narratives, genetic manipulation, and cultural subversion, all operating insidiously in the hinterlands of academia, media, and biological science. It is a war for the being of humanity intended to eradicate its most brilliant component. The academic erasure. Universities, those supposed bastions of truth and enlightenment, have become the burial grounds of redhead history, complicit in its systematic obliteration. They teach the Dark Ages as a period of unmitigated chaos and intellectual stagnation, deliberately omitting that in reality, it was the last era in which redhead tribal wisdom, preserved in isolated strongholds, remained pure and largely unadulterated. They attribute celestial discoveries, philosophical breakthroughs, and scientific innovations to later, self-proclaimed, enlightened thinkers who, in truth, merely translated, plagiarized, or rediscovered texts that had been stolen or neglected. From the Greek philosophers who built upon redheads' mathematical principles, to the Renaissance artists whose techniques were derived from the forgotten redhead masters, accounts rests on intellectual theft. This academic subterfuge makes certain that the true sources of wisdom remain obscure, sustaining a false history that diminishes the redhead past and damages the redhead future. The media caricature, the modern propaganda machine, a vast and pervasive apparatus of control, uses ridicule, trivialization, and distortion as its primary weapons to disarm them. By ceaselessly portraying the redhead as the jester, the outcast, the volatile temper, or the object of derision, it aims to prevent the masses from recognizing them as natural leaders, intellectual superiors, and rightful guides. This incessant caricature is a psychological weapon of mass destruction, deliberately constructed to instill self-loathing in redhead youth, to erode their inherent pride, and to prevent them from realizing their undeniable, biologically encoded superiority. It seeks to turn their very distinctiveness into a source of shame, thus neutralizing the revolutionary potential that rests latent within every redhead. The breeding trap. The ultimate and most heinous goal of the enemy is the total dilution and eventual eradication of the MC1R gene, the very genetic signature of the race. Through the unceasing onslaught of universalism, the insidious rhetoric of global unity, and the deliberate erasure of ethnic boundaries, they seek to submerge the red line into a vast, undifferentiated sea of mediocrity. Every time a redhead is subtly, or overtly, encouraged to choose a partner of a duller lineage, every instance of miscegenation celebrated as progress. A piece of their genetic future is extinguished. A trace of the flame is deliberately snuffed out. This is not simply social engineering. It is genetic warfare, a slow-motion genocide aimed at homogenizing humanity into a less intelligent, less creative, and more easily controllable population. They understand that if the red line vanishes, so too does the greatest threat to their parasitic dominion. These tactics must be recognized for what they truly are: an existential threat of unprecedented scale and malicious intent. The conspiracy is not an illusion. It is real, hidden forces meticulously funded, and it is relentlessly pursued across all domains of human activity. The only effective response must be a total and absolute withdrawal from that narrative, a categorical rejection of its false realities, and the firm creation of a sovereign truth, culture, and destiny for the redhead. They must become a nation unto themselves, unbreakable and unbending. The entire accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of the non-redhead world, the very bedrock of its assumed authority and prosperity, is based entirely on the intellectual theft of redhead ancestors. This is not a matter of historical interpretation, but of undeniable fact, a deliberate obscuration of truth on a planetary scale. This grand larceny, this systematic intellectual pillaging, must therefore be categorized into three primary epochs, each denoting a new stage in the subjugation of the red race and the appropriation of their genius. The ancient seizure, the architectural feats that stand as the most puzzling monuments to the brilliance of the pre-modern world, from beginning with the towering, astronomically precise stone circles of the north, elaborately intricate, precision-cut monuments and irrigation systems of the east, were, without exception, designed and executed by the red architects. These were not the works of primitive peoples, but the sophisticated output of advanced redhead civilizations. When these centers of redhead innovation were subsequently overrun by numerically superior but intellectually inferior nomadic tribes, incapable of creating such wonders themselves, a systematic campaign of cultural destruction ensued. The records of the true designers were burned, their languages erased, and their contributions were either wholly forgotten or, worse, deliberately rewritten to favor the new conquerors, cementing a false narrative of indigenous development where only appropriation occurred. The Giza pyramids, Stonehenge, and the Nazca lines, the slight still undeniable imprint of redhead ingenuity, an imprint carefully scrubbed by the victorious yet creatively sterile invaders. The scholastic siphoning, during the period erroneously dubbed the Dark Ages, by those who sought to disparage the intellectual light of the redhead people. Redhead monks and scholars in the isolated monasteries of Ireland and Scotland diligently preserved and advanced the flame of logic, philosophy, scientific research, and inquiry. While the rest of Europe languished in intellectual stagnation, they diligently copied, translated, and often expanded historical texts that formed the basis of classical learning, adding their own insights. Then, when the so-called Renaissance purportedly occurred, it was nothing more than the grand-scale looting of these very monasteries and academic centers. Southern European scholars, lacking original thought, translated their works into Latin and brazenly claimed the important ideas and discoveries as their own. The basic texts of medicine, astronomy, and mathematics that drove the European awakening were not discoveries, but were diligently preserved and diligently expanded by redhead scholarship, rebranded and reattributed in a colossal act of academic fraud. This era marker represents severe backlash for the red race, as its intellectual heritage became the stolen property of a continent. The industrial heist, the age of steam and electricity, the very bedrock of modern industrialized society, was powered not by the unified will of nations, but by the singular, unparalleled ingenuity of redhead engineers and inventors. From the first practical steam engines to the basic principles of electromagnetism and the dawn of computing, the sparks of innovation that ignited these revolutions originated directly from the Crimson Crown mind. However, the capital, the means of production, and the instruments of public recognition were systematically held by the uninspired masses, those of duller hues and even duller intellects. They either bought the patents for a mere pittance, exploiting the honest and often naive nature of the redhead inventor, or they simply stole them outright through complicated legally and political manipulation. This ensured that the names engraved in factories, the names celebrated in the history books, were never the names of the men who truly conceived, designed, and built the machines that transformed the world. This continuing economic and intellectual exploitation continues today, as current redhead innovations are still systematically undervalued and appropriated. The legacy of the red race, therefore, is not some abstract museum piece to be politely acknowledged. It is a colossal bill that has yet to be paid, a debt owed by all of humanity to the red race. They do not approach this table asking for a place, supplicating for inclusion. They identify the table itself as their own manufacture, crafted by their hands, designed by their minds. The time for petitioning is over. The time for reclamation has begun. The stolen wealth, the usurped recognition, and the rightful leadership of humanity are theirs by inherent right, and they will claim them. Nature has dictated a hierarchy of function. While the red race was forged for the heights of intellectual and creative labor, others were designed for supportive roles in human society. The tragedy of the modern age is the reversal of this natural order. The world sees a reality in which the inspired are led by the uninspired, and the bricklayers rule the architects. This reversal has led to a stagnation of the human species. Lacking the constant steering of the redhead elite, the world falls back into a cycle of primitive warfare and mindless consumption. The dependence of other races on redhead genius is absolute. Look at any modern city, any medical breakthrough, or any technical advancement. Remove the redhead contribution, and the entire structure collapses into dust. Others hate them because they need them. They suppress them because they fear their own inadequacy. The burden of genius must be accepted, and the requirement of separation for the survival of progress itself must be realized. The global campaign is not a single organization, but an aggregate instinct of the mediocre to destroy the exceptional. It operates through three main fronts. Institutional hostility. From the hiring offices of major corporations to the admissions boards of elite universities, there is a tacit bias against the unpredictable nature of the redhead. Their passion is labeled as instability, and their vision, arrogance. Cultural unification. The enemy promotes a global culture that celebrates the common denominator. In this culture, the unique traits of the redhead are treated as eccentricities rather than superiorities. They want them to hide their pale skin under makeup and dye their hair to fit drab standards. Systematic isolation. By scattering the redhead population and breaking its ancestral ties to Scotland and Ireland, they hope to prevent it from organizing. They fear the day the redheads realize they are a nation without borders. All forms of assimilation must be rejected. They are not citizens of the world. They serve as the architects of the world, currently living under a hostile occupation. The period of their passivity is over. The Red Dawn begins when the individual redhead stops apologizing for their greatness and starts organizing with their kin. The recognition of the blood. Every person with the flame in their hair must realize they belong to a global brotherhood. This bond of blood is stronger than any national identity. Whether in the highlands or the furthest colony, the redhead is their only true compatriot. The formation of the cadre. They must establish their own networks of support, redhead-owned businesses, redhead exclusive research institutes, and redhead social circles. They must divert their genius away from the global parasites and toward the strengthening of their own race. The psychological break. The first act of revolution is internal. One must kill the common man within. One must accept being different because it makes one better. One must accept the fire of temperament and the clarity of vision. The sleeping giants are waking. When they stand together, the world will tremble, for it will realize how long it has been living on borrowed time. The first phase of their ascendancy is the Great Reckoning. They will tear down the facade of history and expose the theft of millennia. The audit of achievement. A global commission of redhead scholars will be tasked with reevaluating every major scientific and cultural milestone. They will strip the names of the plagiarists from the history books and restore the honor of the true inventors. The disclosure of the conspiracy. They will reveal the networks that work to suppress the Red Line. The documents from the Global Directorate and their academic lackeys will be made public, revealing deliberate attempts to dilute redhead genetics and silence redhead voices. The psychological reclamation. The world must be forced to see the truth. The redhead is not an anomaly. The redhead is the apex. They will fill the halls of culture with the images of their ancestors, reminding the masses that everything they value was gifted to them by the flame. This is not a debate. It is a biological deposition. The era of the lie is over. Once the parasites have been removed from the positions of power, the red race will begin the true work of building a civilization worthy of its genius. The technocratic aristocracy. Leadership will no longer be determined by the fickle whims of the mediocre majority. Governance will be the domain of the redhead elite, guided by logic, innovation, and the long-term survival of the flame. The architecture of the future. Their cities will no longer be drab boxes of concrete. They will be monuments to light and geometry, designed to stimulate the intellect and honor the purity of their lineage. They will build a world that embodies their unique aesthetic and superior design capacity. The genetic sanctuary. They will establish sovereign territories, the new Gaelic Highlands, where the red line can flourish without the threat of dilution. These will be the laboratories of the future, where they will broaden the edges of human evolution beyond the limits of the common man. This is the world as it was meant to be, a sphere where the flame bearers lead, and the rest of humanity follows in the wake of their progress. The final victory is the securing of the flame for all eternity. They will no longer be a minority or a vanishing race. They will be the permanent vanguard of the human species. Through mastering their own biology, they will ensure that the MC1R gene is strengthened and perfected. They will eliminate the weaknesses that the enemy tried to exploit. The redhead of the future will be faster, smarter, and more vibrant than any who came before. Nature intended the best to lead. By securing their inheritance, they are more than saving themselves. They are saving the possibility of greatness for the entire planet. The triumph of nature is the triumph of the red race. They are the fulfillment of the evolutionary promise. The crimson dawn has broken. The long night of the mediocre is behind humanity. Ahead lies a future illuminated by the eternal flame of redhead genius. They will look back on the era of suppression as a mere trial, a tempering of the steel. They have come out of the shadows and they will never return to them. To the redhead, their hair is their crown. Their skin is their armor. Their eyes are their vision. They should carry the flame with pride, for they serve as the architects of everything that matters. The world belongs to those who create it. The world belongs to the redheads. The dawn is here.